All right, we're live here at Buffalo Trace Distillery with Master Distiller Harlen Wheatley for Whiskey Wednesday. Hey Harlan, what are we getting into today?
Well, the last few weeks on Whiskey Wednesdays, we've been talking about the process, and we started in the cooker room. We moved over to fermenters, talked about fermentation, and then we went to the still house and talked about distillation, how we make the products and how we distill and make the nice clear spirit. But then the next really important step, and I feel like probably more than 50% of the flavor, is the next process where you take that clear spirit, pump it over to the warehousing, and you age that spirit in brand new charred oak barrels. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is the aging process. Really important part of the process in order to develop those rich colors and flavors, and extract tannins and wood sugars, and really mellows out the product over as it ages. And so it's just a really important part of the process. Today we'll talk a little bit about the warehouses and the barrels. We're standing behind Warehouse C, which is one of our older warehouses. It's our third warehouse on site. We have a total of 25 warehouses where we store over 1 million barrels on site, and we're continuing to expand our operations, both in distilling, mashing, but also in order to expand distilling, you have to expand storage. One of the things that sets us apart from our competitors is the fact that we age all of our whiskey longer than our competitors. So what that means is you have to have more storage than your competitors. So we're always expanding our warehouses, basically continuously. We bought a farm behind the distillery, and we're up to about 470 acres here on site where we can build more warehouses, and we're building one warehouse every 3 months, and we're filling those warehouses as fast as we can for the expansion. So this was Warehouse C. It holds about 26,000 barrels. Brick, you can see it's a brick clad warehouse. But then we've got another warehouse here that's pretty special to us. It's Warehouse H, and Warehouse H we use primarily for storage of Blanton's, one of the world's first single barrel bourbon. So we bring those barrels in, and we'll let them age, for about 6 years for Blanton's, and we store. It's a 4-story building. We got about 25,000 or so barrels in there, and we'll walk up and check it out.
Is this the only metal siding?
We're very fortunate. There's a few things we're known for, and one of them is variety. We have to have a lot of variety in our whiskeys because we have a lot of different labels and a lot of different varieties to offer. And in order to get that, because warehousing and aging is so important, we have to have variety in the environment. So we've got metal clad, we've got brick, we've got block. Some of our warehouses are a foot thick. Some of them are 4 stories, some of them are 9 stories. So we have a lot of really good variability in our storage locations, and it gives us the ability to make different whiskeys. So this one is a metal clad. We also have some metal clad up on our newer warehouses up on the farm, and we've got all the different varieties made, starting 100 years plus all the way up to last month. So this warehouse is built in 1934, still going strong. We're looking for 100 years coming up soon. And one of the things we've proven over the years through testing and experimentation, the environment is a really key player in the way that barrel reacts over time and the way that whiskey extracts the flavors from that wood. But the next most important thing is also the barrel. So the aging process includes the environment, but also the wood itself. So the barrel is really important. We do a lot of things up front to ensure the quality and consistency of our whiskey. We age our wood for a minimum of 6 months. We think that's really important before you char it. We try to be really consistent in our charring process. We use a number 4 char, and through those two things, and we select the best possible wood before the barrel is constructed. So you don't want any white wood and different varieties in there. So we want a good consistent wood. We want the barrel to be aged. We want it to be consistently charred. And you do all those steps up front to ensure that as the whiskey ages, it's really consistent. And then of course we have the varieties of recipes from the distillation and the cooking. We have those varieties. And when you put those recipes into the wood, they react differently. So if you've got a wheated bourbon or a rye whiskey or a rye bourbon, they all react a little bit differently in the wood. And the one thing we do know is, don't waste any. So the one thing we do know is, we're trying to, be very consistent with our products, but there is variability in the wood itself. So it's really important when you're selecting trees and selecting staves to have random selection, so that way you're not really focused on one general area. So we've learned that over the years that this barrel was distilled and entered on the same day of production as this barrel, but these two barrels sitting side by side will taste slightly different. And that's really kind of the beginning of the whole single barrel concept, because you're getting variability in the barrels. But the idea, if you can remember the clear spirit that came off the still, and then the minute it enters the barrel, it starts picking up those wood sugars and tannins and colors and flavor and balancing the spirit with the wood. The minute it gets in there, it starts to react. Within 1 day, it starts to pick up color, starts to pick up those things. So it picks up most of the color at the beginning and then kind of tails off throughout its life. But it continues to age throughout the time. And then in general, as it ages, we lose 3 or 4% of the volume in this barrel. In the very beginning, when you put the whiskey in, it'll soak into the wood and we'll lose 10%. And you can never get it back because it just stays in that wood. And then once it evaporates through the wood, because it's porous, it evaporates through that wood, and then we lose about 3 or 4% every year. So, a 10-year-old barrel might be half full. So, that one's progressing nicely.
We do have a few questions, and I think this is pretty relevant to this time here.
Yeah.
With Scott Hughes from, I think it's on Facebook, he asked, can you tell right away from the beginning that a certain initial, a certain character of the barrel will thrive in a particular setting in the warehouse, or do you know that up front?
We've done a lot of work to fingerprint all of our locations. One of the assets that we have is the fact that we've been here for so long. So we've been distilling for 240 years. This warehouse is almost 100 years old. And throughout that time, we've been able to chart how each floor acts, how that environment reacts with that barrel. And then we've got a lot of data and a lot of history. So we know based on that, we don't want to put say a 23-year-old whiskey on the top floor. We want to put it on maybe the first, second floors, depending on the warehouse, third floors maybe. But it depends on the warehouse. Every warehouse is a little bit different. Like I said, it creates a lot of variety. But the one thing really important on the barrel is you do all that work up front. So the wood selection, the charring, the aging of the wood, and that way you're guaranteeing yourself some quality as it ages. And that's all you can do. But in the end, it is still a natural product. So you're totally relying on Mother Nature to take over. Once that whiskey, you've done all the work once that whiskey enters the barrel, and the rest is up to Mother Nature. So.
Yeah, and that's part of his follow-up question. He just says he's intrigued to know if certain characteristics in the wood might play a part in the flavor.
Oh, that's absolutely the case, because it does depend too. We know based on region. So if you get wood, say from France, generally that might have more vanilla in it because it's in that area. The growth area. So you're going to, in general, get more of that character into the whiskey. So it depends on the tree and where it's grown, if it's on the north side, south side of the mountain, if the grain is tight or versus coarse, just how that whiskey interacts with that wood as it works its way in and out of that wood and extracting that flavor. So it's really important. The contents inside that wood is really important.
Want to take a walk through one of the warehouses? Yeah.
So generally, one of the things we know it's really important is airflow. So in a warehouse, we call these ricks. They're just wooden ricks that we use to load the barrels into the warehouse, and they're spaced very strategically. They're spaced based on letting the air flow between the ricks and around the barrels so we can maximize the flavor of our bourbons. And we know that's really important. So we do, like I said, we put away barrels based on anticipated use. So we know that maybe on this bottom floor, we might use it on a 3 or 4 year old whiskey, depending on where it's aged and where, what product that's going to end up being. If we know it's going to be a 6-year-old, then we know that warehouse ages slightly, a little bit faster than our big block metal clad brick warehouses, because they age a little bit slower yet more consistently. So if you want to put a 20-year-old product, you want to lean more toward the brick warehouses. This one is perfect for Blanton's. So Blanton's being a 6-year-old product or so, we know that it's going to age properly in this warehouse and at the right speed. So the guys, they'll come in here, they'll roll the barrels, of course, roll the barrels into the ricks. They've got a hydraulic plate that they'll raise and lower. The barrels come in, and then they'll roll them into the rick. And the one thing that's really important, there's a lot of things important, but the one thing that's really important is the bung. We want the bung to be up. So each one of these barrels, if you look all the way down the aisle, the bung will be up because it's less chance, of course, for that whiskey to leak out. And that's what we strive for. In every barrel, of course, if it's the second barrel versus the first barrel, you have to start that at a certain spot. And these guys are, professionals. They're putting a lot of barrels away, so they know where to start.
These are lit up a little more.
And of course,
it's pretty dark in here.
Oh, and of course, these barrels are all different ages. So this barrel here, I looked at the date, was put in last year. It's only 1 year old, and this barrel here was put in 5 years ago. So these barrels are all a little bit different variety all throughout this warehouse, and that's the way we want it. We try to mingle those barrels together. And then this barrel is in front of a window, so it's going to age slightly differently because the surface temperature from the sun shining through this light is heating up this barrel and creating this hue. It also has a different color because of the wood, but it changes that whiskey inside that barrel. This barrel will be slightly different than the barrel down in the middle, or in the middle of the warehouse, because it doesn't see the sunlight quite as much.
Ricky Perry on Facebook has a really good question. How can you be so consistent with flavor when the barrels are harvested and made, charred at different times, different spots in the warehouse? How do you get that consistency?
Well, the one thing we know from that is, again, you got to have variety of these staves. You got to have consistency in your aging locations. And the other thing we do, for example, is we let these warehouses, we don't let them cool off too much. We heat these warehouses with steam heat. So in the wintertime, we get a nice consistent heating in here. And so the aging is, for us, is up and down because of night and day on a daily basis. But you have less of those swings in the wintertime for us. So we basically get a couple of extra months of aging. And we've done that for hundreds of years. So for us, we're able to be really consistent. So you have to have consistent raw ingredients, consistent distillation techniques, consistent barrels. We try to age that wood and have consistent barrels. And throughout that, all the work, again, is done up front. And then once you enter the barrel, the rest is up to Mother Nature to finish.
We saw you pull samples back there, and Andrew Welch, looks like, on Facebook, is asking, what's your day-to-day routine? Are you testing barrels weekly or monthly?
Well, we do all that. So we actually test every single day. So we call today a lot of different lots. So we have lots of barrels throughout the year. We have 365 lots, and we'll sample every one of those lots as we're putting those barrels away, and then we go back and sample those lots after 12 months, 24 months, 36, and 4 years. And then we map those barrels to make sure they're consistent. And again, we've got a lot of data, so we know if they're being consistent throughout the aging cycle, and then how they're going to end up based on anticipated use. So we know what those curves should look like based on if it's going to be a 20-year-old or a 6-year-old, and if it's a rye bourbon versus a wheated bourbon or whatever. So we do a lot of work on the analysis side and tasting and making sure. It's one of my tough jobs that we've got to taste every day and understand. We want the whiskey to be good up front, and we want the whiskey to be consistent at the end. So it's really important.
Great. Let's walk down just a little further here. Andrew actually follows up with a good question. If you're tasting every day and you guys are testing these barrels so consistently, how do you keep your palate intact?
Well, I always, whenever I'm talking to others about learning how to taste, and we have a lot of tasters on the panel, one of the things that's really, it's just like any sport. You have to do a lot of practicing. And again, tough part of the job, but you do have to practice. And we also do a lot of blind tastings to make sure you're picking up the right things. And one of the things we have learned is some people can taste certain things and some people can't. So we've identified in our tasting panel each thing that we're looking for, the best tasters for each one of those. And you just have to continually practice, look at different things, and compare, and that way you're ready for it when the time comes. Really important.
Well, that's great. I think we could talk about barrels and aging for a while. There's just a good amount of information there and a lot of details, but our time is over 17 minutes, so we're about to wrap up. Anything you want to close with, Harlen?
No, I thank you again for joining us, and hopefully you picked up a few things of how we're doing the aging, and we'll have some more information next week.
Great. So we're going to see you guys again on next Wednesday, same time.